Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, no, it's 4 a.m., but that's okay. We're always working for the shareholder, we say, don't we? Look, I guess I'll just start with a little bit of an introduction. I don't intend to sort of get into the detail too much with respect to sort of the dynamics behind the company in terms of who's on the board or the capital structure, etc. I just really want to focus on the project metrics of what you referenced in terms of the Eldorado recent acquisition. A little bit of introduction about the company. The Whitecliffe opportunity was presented to me by several guys in Perth around about July of last year. We were preparing these projects, and there's 3 of them in total. We'll talk about 2 of them today. We were preparing them for a London IPO. And because of sort of long-standing history and relationships, I'm an old Perth guy. I've lived in London for about 15 years now, but some long-standing relationships back there, and the Whitecliffe opportunity just made a lot of sense at the time. I've worked in the uranium sector for many years, from 2004 to 2014. I was the vendor for the Langer Heinrich project for Paladin, way back when, large shareholder, sold too early, as most people probably did. So I sort of have a deep understanding of this sort of project generation and getting these things to the feasibility level study. I think there's sort of that Lassonde curve really is the front end of that, is really the best place for shareholders to sort of, make very good returns. So we sort of started with this vision or strategy, if you like, around about 18 months ago, and it came about as a function of, during the sort of the COVID lockdowns, myself and several colleagues who had worked on a project called Kavanafeld, where we sort of, during that sort of 2005 to 2012 period, we drilled out what became was recognised as the second largest occurrence of uranium on the planet. That was in Greenland on the southern tip. We went on to work with the Danish and Greenlandic governments to overturn their or repeal their 45-year ban on uranium. Subsequently, I note in the last couple of years that's been put back on. It'd be an interesting situation to see what comes from that Greenland Minerals and Energy Transition Metals, as they're now known. But I guess the point with that whole process is that we sort of know what we're doing in terms of project selection and project generation. The announcement the other day, there's a couple of key metrics, I guess. We'll go to the first slide, if you like. So it's a very large land holding. That's key. It surrounds previous mining centres, the Eldorado, the Contact Lake, Echo Bay, and further to the south, one that we haven't really brought up in terms of investor attention yet is the Terra Mine. 2 sets of licenses here, one at the state level and one at the federal level. Not a lot of consequence between the 2. It's just that old mines tend to be managed by the federal regulator for environmental and sort of remediation purposes. The key message with this project is this is organically grown, and much like several other projects throughout our careers, we have identified these at the grassroots level. For some reason, I'm really not sure why, but this project was just sort of forgotten about in the annals of the mines department in Calgary. And one of my colleagues over there was, during, as I said, during COVID lockdown, just spent a lot of time in the basement reading old paper reports and identified this. So I think that the key with this really is, instead of this being a large vend where, a listed entity may pay anything from sort of, $5 to $55 million for a project of this nature, and how taking into account how advanced it is. We only paid 150,000 Canadian dollar facilitation fee for this consultant to lodge the licenses and make sure all that administrative paperwork is done on the Canadian side. So what that means in the short term is all of that value really is attributed to existing Whitecliffe shareholders. There is a sort of a long history here. It started in the 1900s. In the very early 30s, it started to get a little bit of momentum. It produced uranium at Eldorado initially. from the sort of mid-30s through to the sort of 50s. Due to uranium price collapse, the El Dorado mine shut, and then the regional mines kicked in, because what this project, I guess, represents is not just uranium. What we have here is a model that is a sort of an IOC, or an iron oxide copper gold, and that is a similar geological model to Olympic Dam. In fact, this project is recognised by state surveys as holding the highest potential for IOCG mineralisation in all of Canada. Now, that's quite a badge of honour when you take into account what Canada represents as a mining jurisdiction. So these El Dorado, Echo Bay and Contact Lake deposits really are sufficient expressions of sort of a vertical vein fill. High grade tends to be sort of the last gasp of the emplacement mechanism of all these fluids that go through and drop off all this metal, precipitate all this metal into these very reactive volcanic rocks. And so these old historical mines, as you can sort of see there with all the markings, represent sort of the high grade expression of what is believed to be a much larger bulk tons, probably lower grade ore body at depth. So we're going to be working there in earnest this year. We have an enormous amount of data that has been assimilated over the last sort of 12 months, because one of the things with these types of projects, they take a while to sort of get organised. This hasn't happened in the last 72 hours. This has been months in the making. Large amount of data that needs to be worked through, very high grade expressions here with sort of broader anomalous regions throughout the licence area. For those of you that sort of live on the East Coast, 3,300 square kilometres is around about 1/3 the size of the Greater Sydney region. So, it's a substantial land area. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of a photo there of the Radium Point mine processing facility. It was an underground mine. It was discovered, as I said, in sort of the early 1900s. They've done extensive mines here. I wouldn't sort of suggest that these are in any way in good condition. I think that the whole process really needs to sort of start again in terms of an exploration and a geological model evaluation process. There's two ways to sort of approach this. You're sort of looking for these crackle veins, etc., and or you're looking for sort of the bigger targets, the IOCG, which from all interpretations are sort of a long strike and at depth of these things. But if you look at the scale here, that El Dorado long section, you're only talking that main area is only sort of, 600-800 feet along, that encompasses the main shaft and the 4 main veins that were exploited. These veins can be traced for kilometres. So we have an enormous amount of confidence that we're going to be able to extend known mineralisation. As I said, we have databases here of a lot of historical results that just due to their high grade nature, we weren't necessarily confident reporting these to the stock exchange, because we've all got too many scars from doing that. But I think one of the things we will be doing is validating these results over the coming season with a view to getting some drill rigs in here ASAP. Next slide, please. So, you can sort of see just from this other picture as well that this is a proper province at one stage. This has the I guess the reputation, or is recognised as being Northwest Territories' first operating large-scale mine. It, over the course of that sort of 40-year period, from the late 30s through to the very early 80s, produced what is a significant amount of metal just out of 3 relatively small mining centres. These numbers, if you add all of that up, that's more than $2 billion US dollars in today's value that was produced during that 40-year period. Now, interestingly, and this is really rare in the terms of the commodities world, or the mining sector in general, the exploration sector, is to be able to walk into a region, a proper region, right? This is Canada, and find a project of this nature without any license on it. It's remarkable. And one of the good things about Canada in this part of the world is that there's a lot of service providers up there. I'm not sure how many of your viewers are familiar with sort of what would you say, the economic significance or consequence or situation of our Canadian brethren, but you know, they're not in too good a shape, their industry over there, certainly their exploration industry. And so one of the things that I think Australians have done very well is position themselves in terms of the lithium, you know, and now we're going to see other projects come to the fore as, you know, we sort of benefit from, you know, capturing that lithium wave in Australia that has monetized our industry to seek resources and reserves all throughout the world. So we're very excited by this project. It's cost us nothing. So, you know, we're coming from a very low base here, I think, in terms of peer comparisons. You know, you can do your own metrics, but we've got a market capitalisation of 19 million Australian dollars. And that's sort of circa 10 million pound. And I can tell you that a lot of people here in the UK find that very cheap, relatively great value. And I can sort of see a very strong share price response to the news as it comes out, as we develop this project and make it more appreciated in the wider market. You know, this is something that we're going to be working on heavily leading up into the field season to make sure that the whole world actually understands, you know, that Radium Point's now back online. So next slide, please. With a creaky table here, I apologise about that. Again, this sort of comes into our broader strategy with respect to, you know, what it is we were going to be doing, or what we are going to be doing with Whitecliffe. I think one of the things that we took on very early, and it comes as a function of recognising the market dynamics between the spot, the long term, and, you know, some of these guys in Canada, I refer to them the smartest guys in the room. They sort of come in and they swipe the spot physical. And what that means is as the price steps out, they're sort of dropping a little bit of supply out for the reactors. The interesting thing here, and, you know, everybody's got their view on uranium. I don't intend to spend too much time on it, but this has only just started. You know, one of the things that a reactor has is almost an indifference to the uranium price. It's such a critical input to the overall process, a capital investment of $10 billion versus a price per pound of, you know, a couple of hundred. They're just price insensitive, this stuff. I think what has happened over the last, you know, several years to several decades is that they've kind of gotten fat on their ability to manage the spot price, to create a situation whereby they use that spot price to mark their long-term offtake prices, where most of the volume happens. Well, that's no longer the case now, because there is actually no physical spot. It's comes at the good graces of some of these ETFs and Sprott Physical and, you know, a thundering herd of hedge funds that sit behind them. So, you know, I see this, you know, this early price rises. 150 is the next stop for uranium, I'll call that now. And, you know, I think we've positioned ourselves beautifully to take advantage of that. The second string to the bow of Whitecliffe really is whilst the uranium is in the power generation, one also needs a foot in the power distribution concept. And one of the leading metals in that is obviously copper. We, again, through, you know, pretty solid geological work by the team, some of the guys I work with, they identified this project, and we subsequently took out very large licenses, holdings right up in the Northwest Territories. For those of you that are familiar with this part of the world, but unfamiliar with us as a team and a sort of a experience, we've spent the best part of 20 years, probably even longer now, working in the Arctic. You know, we've spent a long time working in Greenland. We have a number of projects over there. We've got joint ventures with large American private equity funds, and we understand the logistics and the climate and what needs to be done. And, you know, all of our mistakes, I think it's fair to say, have been made back when we were younger in this part of the world. We have a very clear understanding of what's required to operate here. And I think that during 2024 is really going to be one of these years where we confirm what we have, we expand on what the projects represent and what their potential is. And, you know, as I said, there's a third project hopefully coming in here shortly that probably just as big, if not bigger, than all of these things, that fits into this overall strategy of where the company's going. Next slide. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm not, again, don't want to sort of bore people, because I think, you know, we've come to the sex and violence end of the webinar now, but these geological models are very well understood. They're recognised globally as being very productive for metal production and or emplacement. This is the model for the copper mine deposit. Similar sort of model can be applied for IOCG. You know, you're talking large amounts of fluid in the system, deep plumbing, reactive rocks. It's just what type of metals have been dissolved in the fluids that are travelling through these sort of reactive rocks, etc. But they always tend to be involved, associated with volcanics. As I said, a large amount of fluids. If you can sort of see just over to the left of this visual, those sort of red cracks, to a certain extent, that's what we're looking at in terms of both copper mine and the radium point, is the sort of surface expression, the blow off of really these last gasp volatiles as sort of all this emplacement takes place. They tend to be very high grade, low tons, but you know, you can sort of get a start on these things. The bigger picture here, though, really is going to be sort of chasing down the plus billion ton resources in terms of the sediment hosted red bed copper, and also these IOCG deposits at Bear Lake. And probably all we need to do on that. Next slide, please. So yeah, look, I mean, this chart, you know, is kind of pretty groundbreaking when it first came out. I think every investor had an inkling that this is the case just through hard-won experience. But one of the things I've always found as an investor in the commodity space is you've got to be at the start of the curve. You know, you don't want to be at the top of these things where you're sort of moving into what is kind of generally considered a news desert, or just an orphan period, or, you know, even certainly relatively speaking, I mean, starting production's fine if that's your thing. But I've always found the best part of the market returns are always on that discovery phase, reevaluating old assets that you get cheaply and bringing them back to life, so to speak. For example, Langer Heinrich, you know, went to several $1 billion with Johnny Borshoff. Several other projects that we've done over our lives. You know, Greenland Minerals and Energy under my management went to almost $1 billion ASX 200 company until the 14 collapse. And yeah, this is where we've positioned Whitecliff to take advantage of these discovery phases that we will be undertaking in 2024. You know, we've got a bright future in front of us. We've got a lot of support out of England that you know, will be brought to bear now that these two assets certainly have sort of been announced. A third one coming. It's pretty well telegraphed over the next couple of months. So yeah, look, I think that sort of covers it all. I don't think there's another slide. Oh, okay. We better talk about our Australian stuff. So when I first joined Whitecliff, they had quite a large portfolio of rare earth, lithium, and gold, and various commodities. It was quite a well curated portfolio. I think one is can be fairly certain that we are going to be moving this set of assets on. Hopefully as an entire portfolio. I think in their current form altogether, they represent enormous value for a potential acquirer. Not too much to talk about there really in the future, apart from we're not going to lose focus on these Australian assets. We really are going to get in and look to focus all our time and energy and resources on these Canadian assets. So, Dave, I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Rod. First of all, thanks for staying up late or getting up early, whichever way it was. And as you say, we're now, what did you say? We're at the sex and violence end of the presentation. So whatever form that takes, hopefully neither of those will be visible here on the webinar. But a question for you: where I know it's only early days, you've picked up the assets, clearly very excited, as is the market. Where do you turn your attention? What does the work program look like? You may not have articulated that yet to the market, but what does the work program look like, and how will you sort of choose to focus on the two projects moving forward?
Yeah, I guess there's two streams that will be running roughly in parallel. One is the validation of the existing data sets. You know, one of the I wouldn't call it a constraints. One of the framework for releasing results, whether they be geochemical or drilling results, etc., come with necessary verification processes. And at the moment, because of the historical nature of this project, we're not able to announce any of those results, some of which are quite extraordinary, to be quite honest, just still sticking out of the ground. So I think there's a verification process that shareholders can sort of look forward to as we work through that data set and verify those things, and then make releases on the regional project areas, the anomalies that have been the Gossans, excuse me, a little bit more information about the mines themselves. But second to that, and probably a little bit more relevant to listeners today, is the actual work on the projects themselves. So we without sort of burning the powder, I guess, we have work programs that have been defined now for Coppermine. Coppermine is the most northern project we own. That will be the initial focus. We will then withdraw those assets as the season closes over there, and we will come down to Radium Point, complete the work programs there. It'll be a combination of airborne. We're working with quite a number of Canadian consultants. Interestingly, Dave, one of the things in Canada, and I touched on this before, just because of the economic situation or whatever it is in Canada, there's a lot of service providers, and you can get some really good rates for activities through all these sort of third person or third party contractors, whether they geophysical, geochemical, drilling, etc. There are some other groups in this broader region, American West Metals, I think they're called. They're up to a little bit to the northeast. We're sort of looking to replicate their success in terms of contractor selection and piggybacking off their guys who are already in the area. So just cutting down that mobilisation, demobilisation, reducing the cost of the overall program is really core to the approach there. But yeah, a lot of results. I mean, really, the key value, if I can leave listening interested parties with a bit of a hook here, the key metric here is to get these projects back on the map, because they're in some cases, the copper mine hundreds of years old, sort of lost in the annals of time. Radium Point, lost for the last 40 years. Get these projects back on the table, get them in the peer tables, get people understanding actually the true scale of these things. And, that's when you're going to get your real move in the share price.
Final question before I welcome everyone to the panel. You are familiar with permitting challenges, safe to say. How does this jurisdiction compare to some of those jurisdictions you've worked in previously, where you have had permitting success? How does this jurisdiction compare?
Well, I mean, let's compare it to Australia, which is a jurisdiction everyone understands. I think Canada, I'm as nationalistic as the next guy, but let's be honest, it's getting difficult in Australia to get things done, whether it's because of a cost barrier, a permit barrier, a NIMBY barrier, an Indigenous barrier. The barriers are just, appear from my perspective to be just becoming endless. So this really, again, comes back to, this is a very well thought out strategy, Dave. This is something that we've looked at and compared in terms of permitting and what's required here. These areas are very pro-mining. They've been pro-mining for a long time. yes, there's obviously environmental, but there's environmental considerations in every place. What you have here, I think, is this is based in North America, and this is primarily where the main driver of, you know, a lot of this North American focus is going to be. There's a very parochial color coming to the US. They need to secure their own supply lines. They've recognised that, you know, some of these lesser developed countries are not as reliable as they once were for whatever reason. And there's an enormous amount of effort and time and investment, that's going into working up internal supply lines. And one of the things that we hope to be is really at the front of that queue in terms of, you know, potentially state subsidies, some investment, getting assistance with getting what was, you know, Canada's largest uranium mine. Just think about that for a second. Canada's largest uranium mine, getting that back going again. So I don't think the permitting here is going to be any different. You know, we've started the engagement process with the Indigenous, the First Nations. The Mines Department are very well known to us because we've sort of driven them mad over the last 12 months. Yeah, we're in good shape, mate.
Thanks, Rod. A great presentation. As I said, early days, given only just recently announced the transaction, but clearly caught the market's attention. A management team with strong capability and strong track record of delivering results. So one to watch.